the present danger of all sorts of persons in the prevalancy of apostasy from the truth and decays in the practice of evangelical holiness. The last part of this discourse is designed for cautions to those who yet stand, or think they stand, with respect to that general defection from the gospel whose causes and occasions we have thus far inquired into. And to this end some directions may be added to be used as preventatives of its contagion. This method are we guided to by the apostle, who, having declared the apostasy and ruin which ensued thereon of the generality of the church of the Jews, improves the consideration of it to the caution of others under a present profession of the truth. You will say then, he says, to the Gentile believers, the branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Well, because of unbelief they were broken off, and you stand by faith. Do not be high-minded, but fear, for if God did not spare the natural branches, take heed lest he also spare not you. Behold, therefore, the goodness and severity of God on them which fell, severity, but toward you goodness, if you continue in his goodness. Otherwise you also shall be cut off. Romans 11:19-22. And in another place, on an alike occasion, he speaks to the same purpose. Let him that thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 12. Most men are apt to suppose that the continuance of the true religion in any place depends solely on the prudence and industry of those to whom the conduct of its outward concerns are committed. The interest of some and the duty of others in the management of human laws and constitutions are generally looked on as a sufficient and the only means of its preservation. And those of this persuasion think they have personally no concern in this, but only to herd themselves in the multitude, and to take their fate, whatever it be. Such as these will despise our cautions as those from which the reasons of their confidences and fears are most remote. But whereas a profession of religion in a community of Christians will not be preserved, but by the power of it in its individuals, the only root in which it will long thrive or grow, we shall not at all concern ourselves in them by whom the directions of their duty are thought needless or useless. For after the utmost exercise of human policy, it is a wisdom that is from above which must be our stability. And if the power of truth and holiness be not preserved in the hearts and lives of particular persons, the profession of them in churches, or the pretense of them in nations, which are all that will remain, are neither acceptable to God nor useful to the souls of men. Some think themselves, as far as their own part, little concerned in these things. That there is such a defection from the gospel has been complained of, they cannot deny. And he will also grant that it is a desperately pernicious thing to them that are overtaken by it. Therefore, they do not suppose it amiss that men should be warned of its danger and directed to avoid it. But this, they think, is necessary for others, not for them. For as for their part, they have not the like occasions, nor exposed to the same temptations with them who formerly apostatized from the gospel, or are in danger now to do so. Besides, they know well enough what are their own resolutions, and that though all man should forsake either the doctrine taught in or the obedience required by the gospel, yet should their constancy be immovable. But I do not think these apprehensions sufficient to render our warnings needless. Occasions and temptations are not in our power. Our greatest present freedom from them will not secure us from the assaults of the next hour. Peter didn't see his dangers and fears when he so confidently engaged to constancy in the profession of his master, which yet within a few hours came upon him. And such is the subtlety of our spiritual adversaries, that sometimes we are under the power of temptation when we think ourselves most remote from it. It is beyond the compass of human reason to take it at once a prospect of all the causes and means of it, from the ways of its efficacy and prevalency. And if in it any time we judge ourselves free from an hour of temptation which comes upon the world to try them that dwell therein, which most are exercised with, and many are prevailed on by, so as to be secure and regardless of the means of our preservation. Of all men we are in the most danger to be ruined by it. Neither will the best of our resolutions be of any avail without the utmost of our endeavors. The great apostle thought resolved with respect to the person of Christ that he would neither deny him nor forsake him. And if this confidence did not betray him into his fall, yet to be sure it did not preserve him from it. And it was upon his own experience that he gave afterward that holy advice, that we should give a reason of the hope that is in us with meekness and fear, 1 Peter 3, verses 14 and 15, and pass the time of our sojourning here in fear, chapter 1, verse 17. Our highest confidences have ever proved the most deceiving presages of future stability. Therefore, the utmost I design in the ensuing cautions is but to excite men to a due apprehension of their danger, that they be not surprised into that pernicious security which is a mire in which this rush grows. Number 1. The consideration of the extent and almost universality of this apostasy may be of use to this purpose. Ignorance, profaneness, worldly mindedness, with sensuality of life have attained the most eminent Catholicism in Christendom. The complaint of the prophet is not unsuited to the present state of this, Isaiah 1, 4-6. Ah, sinful nation! A people laden with iniquity, a seed of evildoers, children that are corrupters. They have forsaken the Lord, they have provoked the Holy One of Israel unto anger, they are gone away backward. The whole head is sick, and the whole heart faint. From the sole of the foot even to the head there is no soundness in it, but wounds and bruises and putrefying sores. Do we hear but of this or that individual person who has apostatized from a profession of holiness into a sensual, wicked, worldly course of life, or is turned from the faith into pernicious errors? There is no man that is wise and careful of his eternal concerns, but he will take it as a warning to examine, try, and be careful of himself. And his counsel is laid before us by the Apostle, 2 Timothy 2, verses 17 and 19. What then is required of us when we see nations, churches, multitudes of people, by one means or other, degenerated from that power of godliness which they once professed? If we hear that one or other in a city is visited with a plague, we are not altogether insensible of our own concern and danger, because we know how usual it is for the infection of that disease to spread and diffuse itself. But if the whole city be infected, and thousands fall under it every week, there is none so sottish as to need much warning of their danger, and we shall be less concerned for our immortal souls and their eternal condition than we are for these frail carcasses and their continuance for a few days in the world, which if they escape one distemper may yet in a few moments fall under the power of another. This spiritual pestilence that had formerly walked in darkness is now a destruction wasting at noonday. Nations are depopulated by it, and cities left desolate as to their interest in God and the gospel. And is it not high time to look diligently, lest the infection reach us also, lest we also should fail and come short of the grace of God and be hardened through the deceitfulness of sin? As then our bodies are of the same natural frame and constitution as they have in them, the same burnouts, the same kind of animal spirits as are in those who are infected with the plague, in which we are liable to the same infection with them. So there are in our souls and minds the same principles of sin and love of the world, as are infected, drawn away, enticed, excited, and enraged by outward occasions and temptations until they have ended in apostasy. Do we think that we shall be always easily preserved, and that while we are careless and secure from that torrent which has carried away such multitudes before it, are we in ourselves better than they, or any of them? Have we a patent for our preservation while we neglect any ways, means, or diligence that the rule requires to this end? Does not God show to us not one but many churches and nations, saying, Go to those Shilohs where I sometime place my name, and see what is become of them, and what I have done to them? Will you go after them? Have a mind to be made like them? Do not say within yourselves, We have Abraham to our father. We have those outward privileges and advantages which they didn't have. For they also enjoyed the same until they had forfeited them by their apostasy. Certainly the general prevalency of this evil proclaims such a danger as no wise man, no man that takes care of his own salvation ought or indeed can neglect. Therefore, as it is always with Christians, if ever it be a time to watch, to stand on our guard, to take to ourselves the whole armor of God, to be jealous of ourselves, to be constant and diligent in the use of all means, both private and public, for our preservation. This is the time now to be so. And if professors will not be awakened, if they will not stir up themselves with the gifts and graces which they have received, if they will please themselves that all is well with them, and is likely to be so, if they will yet mix themselves with boldness and confidence in the ways of the world, oh, that my head were a fountain of tears! Oh, that my soul could mourn in secret for them, seeing assuredly they will not be able to stand in the day of temptation, which is come upon the face of the earth, to try them that dwell in it. The outward court is long since given to be trodden down by the Gentiles, and how soon the enemies may roar in the very sanctuaries, and set up their banners for tokens, we do not know. For the present state of this defection has a dangerous aspect. Physicians say no man dies in the declension of his disease, and when a public pestilential distemper is in its wane or decay, the danger is esteemed in a great measure over. But while a disease is yet growing and daily spreading its contagion, while the bills of mortality are every week increased, they are only hardened and profligate persons, whom the commonness of the judgment renders regardless and senseless of it. And it is no otherwise with the evil complained of at this day. There's almost nothing in the world that all sober men generally agree in but this alone, that the whole world waxes worse and worse. Who can give an instance of the decrease or abatement of any one sin in its love or practice, but that some are advanced to a higher degree of confidence in their perpetration than former days or ages afford us of any precedent? Everyone can declare what instances we have of a spiritual recovery from any of our decays. What attempts to that purpose are made by any, unless by such as are not of consideration, as do not have the advantages to enable them to effect anything in it. The world is highly at variance about religion, managing its differences with great animosities in industry, how one way, party, and profession may draw persons from other ways and professions. The sole business of the Church of Rome is by all manner of artifices to win over men to their communion, that is, a subjection of their souls, consciences, and entire interests here and for eternity to the authority of the Pope. Others bestir themselves as well as they are able to keep what they have, and to rescue men from their seductions. And although they have the advantage of the truth on their side, and for the most part the advantages of abilities and the management of their cause, yet they visibly lose ground every day. And where one is recovered by the Roman interest, many are added to it. And there can be no reason assigned to this, but only that the apostasy is on its increase, this being one way of it. Half that pains would have formerly turned a whole city from popery, which will not now succeed to the preservation of a single person. But in the meantime, both in one profession and another, all sorts of men continue regardless of gospel, holiness, and obedience. And while they quarrel about the outward form, the inward power of godliness lies neglected. Do we see things anywhere in the world upon our recovery, or any thriving design for the retrieval of holiness? The name and thing are growing more and more into contempt. What instance can be given in which this apostasy from the gospel does or may exert itself? be it in atheism, be it in popery, and hatred of and scoffing at the mysteries of evangelical truth, and worldliness, profaneness, vanity, and sensuality of life, and the coldness of love and barrenness among professors. It is not openly in its progress. And is this a time to be secure, careless, or negligent? Are we sure that this epidemic infection shall not enter our habitations? Do we not find how it has, one way or other, attempted to do so already? Can we find no decay in zeal or love among ourselves? No adherence to the world unsuited to our present state and condition in it? No neglect of duties, no rareness in divine visitations, no lack of life and delight in spiritual communion with Christ, no hurtful growth of carnal wisdom with all of its attendants? Or have we not found ourselves, one way or other, sensibly attacked by these evils? It is to be feared that those who can make no observation of anything of this nature among themselves are somewhat sick and affected by the Laodicean distemper. And if we will not be awakened and stilted up to a more than ordinary diligence, care, and watchfulness, at such a season as this is, it is to be feared that ere long the generality of professors will come to be in the condition of the church of Sardis, to have a name to live, but indeed in the sight of Christ to be dead. As this apostasy is yet in its progress, so what will be its event? What will it rise to is altogether uncertain. God could put a stop to it when he pleases, as he has in his holy purposes fixed bounds to it by which it shall not pass. But in the meantime, being greatly provoked by the ingratitude of a wicked world, no man knows how long he may suspend those more powerful influences and more extraordinary effects of his word and spirit, which are needful to the healing of the nations, and without which they will not be cured. I hope for better things and pray for better things, but I have no certain ground of assurance that this apostasy shall not grow until, in one instance or other of it swallow up all visible profession. The whole world, so far as I know, I mean these parts of it, may become papal again, or be so corrupted in their principles and profane in their lives as that it is no great matter what their profession and religion is. Two things I do know or believe, namely, that the foundation of God stands sure, having this seal: the Lord knows them that are his elect, that truly fear him and diligently serve him, shall be preserved from perishing eternally, and from everything that necessarily leads to that. That God has appointed a time and season in which he will not only put a stop to this defection from the gospel, but an end of it also. He will one day execute the vengeance that he has written and recorded on the throne, power, and kingdom of the anti-Christian apostasy. And in one day shall the plagues of Babylon come upon her, and he will again turn to the people of pure language, that they may all call on the name of the Lord to serve him with one consent. Zephaniah 3:9. He will again revive the beauty of his worship and the glory of holiness in the earth. But in the meantime, what things may come to, I know not. Those who pretend to a clear inspection in the future things may not do amiss strictly to examine the grounds in which they proceed, for many have been made ashamed of their predictions, that within such a time the yoke of Babylon should be broken. This is all I say, and I say it only for myself. I know no assurance that can be given on infallible grounds that the apostasy which we are treating of shall not one way or other, in one instance or other, become again to be Catholic, and prevail against all open visible profession of the purity and power of gospel worship and holiness. Now, if this be not so to others, yet to myself it ought to be a warning how I may be thought worthy to escape and to stand before the Son of Man. And I am sure there is so much danger of it, at least, as to deserve the consideration of all who take care of their eternal salvation. For if things should come to such a pass, they are not many, they are but very few who will be entirely preserved. The most will, one way or other, suffer loss, and it is not an easy thing to be found among the number of the few in such a season. Can we think the men careless in holy duties, cold in zeal, lukewarm in love, barren in good works, cleaving to the world and conformable to it, low in their light, dubious in their state, useless in the world, fearful of trials will be of this number. They are woefully deceived who are pleased with such apprehensions. Other principles, other ways, courses, and practices will be required in them who shall be hidden and safeguarded in that day.